Well, thank you all for being here. Sorry for a minute's delay in getting started, and hopefully we'll have a good time together. I'm excited for this conversation. If you know me, you know that I'm passionate about this topic, and I have to admit I feel a little bit like shy or squeamish about the audacity of the topic because rich is such a a bodacious word that doesn't jive with most humble Midwesterners, but I think it's going to be a fun conversation today. If you don't know me, and even if you do, even if you do know me, my name is Mark Sandvig. I'm the team leader at Keller Williams Legacy Group Realty, based down here in Canton, and offices spread across kind of the southern edge of Northeast Ohio. I live in Fair Lawn with my wife and 4 children, and I fell in love with this industry and made my way to this industry kind of in the wealth building conversation. And if you know me, you know more about that. But this is going to be a fun, interactive class. We're going to talk about the importance of it. And my hope is that you leave with kind of stronger moorings around what your path towards building wealth could be. Before I dive in, and I know most don't have their videos on and most aren't looking to unmute, but I would love to hear from 3 of you why you're here today, what you're hoping to get out of today's conversation. And I might call on you if people don't speak up.
Well, I thought I was going to have to shave my head if I was going to have to be rich.
Touche.
Singer. But I think building wealth is, it's not just about, what you do. It's also about like how you move your life around it. You don't want that lifestyle creep to start changing when you make more money. You want to still be smart, but at the same time, how do you spend the money at that point other than investing? Where do you enhance your life at that? You know what I mean?
Cool. Yeah, we'll get to that. I'm glad you asked that. How do you enhance? Cool. Yeah. Who else? 1 or 2 more questions, or why you're here. Lori, are you going to chime in? It looks like you're getting ready.
Yeah, I unmuted myself. There I am.
I hear you.
Oh, well, yeah. Hey, so I was curious. I have, when I saw the names you put up on here, J.L. Collins, Kiyosaki, and Dave Ramsey. I've been a Dave Ramsey financial coach for several years. Follow his principles, teach his classes, teach financial peace. So I'm also passionate about helping people get out of debt, build wealth, one step at a time. And so I just kind of wanted to see how you put that all together.
Cool.
And how easy it is to become a millionaire. It's not that hard, especially if you start small and long.
Yeah. Time on task over time equals results, right?
Right.
That's cool. I'm going to share my Dave Ramsey story in a little bit, Lori. So that's great. Yeah, I am a passionate student. I brought a few of the books on money that I've read in the last year. I love this stuff, and Dave is where it started for me. And so as I was putting some of my thoughts together, I'm like, if you love or hate some of the people I'm talking about, you're probably going to feel like, because I have good thoughts and maybe a con for each of them. I don't think there's any teacher that you just wholesale, oh, okay, whatever you say, whatever you say is the gospel, except for Jesus, perhaps. And so I think learning to filter, okay, what makes the most sense for me in my situation, all of that. And I'm certainly not the one who has all the answers. All right, 1 more. That's great, Lori. Sandy, I can see you. Why are you here?
I want to build a legacy for my children and grandchildren. And now with coming to Keller Williams, I see that that's a distinct possibility. I always thought it was out of my reach, but now I'm learning more and more that it's not.
Yes.
So I'm excited to learn.
I love that. That was a great, you teed me up nicely for this next one. So if you're at KW, you know that our mission is to build careers worth having, businesses worth owning, lives worth living, experiences worth giving, and legacies worth leaving. And at the end of the day, it's not, life isn't just about money. Gary says that, money is good for the good that money can do. And we've heard that before, but as we go back and look at the mission here, the experience is worth giving. And Sandy, you just said the legacy is worth leaving part. That, your legacy, Sandy, when it's all said and done, is going to be far more about who you were to the people that you love and know than about the things that you bought for them. That being said, how much cooler might it be if there was a legacy of generosity as well? It's a both and I think as a caveat, when we talk about the money being good for the good that money can do, that's so important to keep central, is it not? I think the billionaire that's lost his way, the greedy capitalist, the people who view money just for the sake of money, I look at that and I lament, if I'm honest. I look at that and say, that's kind of a shallow existence. Money is neutral, and if all it is about the money, then I think that's thin. And so I think a couple of you have hit on that in a different way. Because for me, my path towards all of this has little to do with riches, and everything to do with opportunity, freedom, the ways that I can bless my family. So I think that's an important thing to hit. Why is this conversation so important? I think everyone thinks, yeah, I would love to have more money. I would love to build wealth. I would love to maybe even be rich, even though that's, again, more of an audacious claim. And I think just a couple of thoughts. I'm admitting people as we keep going here. One is, I think, whether I can see you and you raise your hand or you mentally raise your hand, many of us were raised in homes where the conversation around wealth was taboo. That's mighty, high and mighty of someone to think that of themselves, or no, we're just humble folks. There was a taboo-ness, and when things are taboo, what happens? We don't talk about them. And so when it's taboo, we don't talk about them, and then we don't get educated on what we can actually do in order to build a legacy, as you said, Sandy. It's important also because my formatting messed up here. That's just supposed to say the opportunity. Path is supposed to go under unclear. So the opportunity is huge. While a lot of the narrative out there is the economy is hard, interest rates are high, inflation makes life more expensive. All of those things are true, but never has there been a better time in the history of our world where people have more opportunity to make money and build wealth than today. And I feel firmly, that's not a political statement. That's just if you want to figure out a way to make money, and if you want to figure out a way to have your money make money, the information's all out there. We've never had more access to information and access to easy ways to help our money to grow. But then I think the third major reason why this conversation is so important is that the path is unclear for so many of us. I think, I know I'm supposed to save. I know I'm supposed to invest. I know I shouldn't go into crippling debt. But like, what accounts should I open up? Like, where do I begin? And I'm not going to pretend to have the time to go into every little detail, but we will have space at the end for kind of an ask me anything if you want to get detailed. I'm just one person. Oh. Okay, so my story, and I think anytime someone's talking about wealth or riches in the conversation, you might say, why does this person, who do they think they are, or why do they have the right to lead this conversation? And the truth is that I'm just a regular guy, a fellow journeyman with you who happens to be passionate about this topic and who's been thoughtful for a handful of years around it. So just a brief background on me. I grew up in a ministry home, a single earning in ministry home. So my dad was a pastor, my mom was a homemaker, and read between the lines, our bills were paid and we didn't want for anything, but we weren't going on fancy vacations. We weren't, it wasn't an extravagant lifestyle. in the least. But I did gain a framework for the importance of saving money. And when I was 12 years old, my dad took me to meet with his financial planner. And I don't really remember much from that conversation, except that financial planner put basically a compound interest, put money into a compound interest calculator. It says, Mark, you're 12 years old. If you started saving $20 a month now until you're 65, here's what it could turn into. And that was kind of the first time where I gained a picture for the value of time and money working together. So then fast forward, fresh out of college, I was kind of a knucklehead. I frittered money away. I went to concerts and spent money on t-shirts and stuff, nothing extravagant. I didn't go into bankruptcy or anything like that. I did take on some debt going to college. But Lori, this is going to tee you up. Someone like Lori entered my world, and I went through something called Financial Peace University, which many of you have heard of Dave Ramsey. He's, I would say, a polarizing character for many. You love him, or you're like, wait, that guy's got a lot of opinions, and I'm not sure how I feel about him. But Dave was instrumental in my journey, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means later. That was an eye-opener. Okay, now I'm an adult. I have agency, and it's my job to wrap my mind around what I do with my money. And I think the point that I want to make there is I think many of us live in victim mentality or passive mentality. Oh, I just make my money and I just do what I do. And they don't have the agency that I think me going through Financial Peace University helped me to realize as a 21-year-old who was making $24,000 at that time. Then that kind of opened my eyes to what I'm going to call my thirsty phase, where if it was a book about money, I wanted it. If there was a podcast about money, I was going to listen to some of it. And frankly, I'm still in that phase to this day. Like I, mentioned here, these are a few of the ones that I've read. And the point with that is not so much about trying to find the secret, as much as it is seeking to be a master of the topic and applying principles in your life. And I'm glad to share resources with you later. What are some of the good books out there? Some of the good podcasts, if you're at all curious. And then for me, from a mindset standpoint, there are those of us who are paralysis by analysis people. Oh, but what's the expense ratio of this account? Where should I do this? And you don't do anything. And then you got people that are reckless and saying, oh, sure, that sounds great. I'm going to just throw all of my money there. And I think for me, part of my secret sauce, for lack of better language, has been, you know what, I'm going to learn, but I'm going to do more than I'm going to learn, because learning doesn't necessarily on its own build wealth. So then I went and I've been tracking my kind of journey for 14 years now. So March 15th of 2014, I said, this is the day that I'm going to start tracking my net worth. And I'm going to start counting my assets, counting my liabilities, and I'm going to set a goal every single month. So for the last 120 months, I've had a monthly goal for how much I wanted my net worth to grow. I haven't hit it every month, but we've heard it said that what gets measured gets managed, and I've done that. And I went from a very small net worth to a net worth that I'm proud of, and it's not about the number; it's about paying attention and in making progress along the way. So that's a little bit about me. I'm still very much in the journey, but what you can accomplish in 10 years is pretty incredible. All right. So now what I'm going to do is talk through kind of 4 voices that have shaped my thinking. And this is not about like, okay, pick your favorite. It's more, hey, here's 4 who shaped my thinking in really positive ways. And I'm going to nuance it with like, okay, but here's a point where I might not fully agree with this person, or where they may overplay it. So Dave Ramsey, many of you are familiar with Dave, have heard Dave, perhaps. He's had a best performing podcast for decades now, many different books, and Total Money Makeover is kind of his foundational piece. And I would say the three major lessons that I've learned from Dave. Number one is we're more likely to succeed when we focus on one thing at a time. I think one thing that Dave gets really right is the importance of human psychology. And if I'm trying to do lots of different things, I'm not going to be doing any of those things well. So Dave is a master of like boiling it down, making it simple and say, hey, you've got 7 baby steps. You need to save up a starter emergency fund. You need to pay off all consumer-related debt. You need to save up a 3 to 6 months emergency fund. You need to be investing 15% of your income, and from there on. And I think that's one thing he gets really well. And I think if you're a person who likes nerding out, well, I could do this and I could do this and I could do this and I could do that, but you're not really doing anything with excellence, Dave will say, hey, the difference between where you are and where you want to be doesn't have to do with an interest rate. It has to do with you actually focusing and saving money every month over time. And I think he's right. I think many of us get into this kind of, what about this? What about that? And Dave says, quit reading the news and start saving, which I think there's a lot to be said for that. He talks about the debt snowball. People say, oh, should I avalanche my debt? Should I snowball my debt? And I think part of the genius of the debt snowball, for those who aren't familiar, basically, if I've got 4 different types of debt, I've got a credit card here, a student loan here, a car note here, and a mortgage here, he's going to say, start with the smallest debt, not the highest interest rate, but the smallest debt, and pay that one off first. Now, if you're a math person, you may say, no, you should pay off the highest interest rate first. And Dave's not going to disagree with the math there, but he'll say that life, if math was the problem, we'd all be billionaires, right? But psychologically, hey, if I paid off the small one, I'm going to feel like I'm winning. I'm going to feel like I've got momentum, and then I can kind of begin rolling from there. So I agree with him. I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. But whether you avalanche or whether you snowball, it doesn't matter. Get aggressive about your consumer debt in particular. He also talks a lot about the value of an emergency fund. I think when you're a real estate agent and your income goes like this, it can be easy to not, have months where you feel scarce. And so having an emergency fund, which should be used for emergencies, it's not, oh, my income's a little bit low this month and I need to pay obviously you need to pay your rent, but it's tires go out, it's a medical moment, it's things that are truly meant for emergencies. My main beef with Dave is that he, I shouldn't say he hates mortgages. He says that mortgage he'll allow is 20% down on a 15% note. He's just very conservative as it relates to debt. I'm personally a real estate investor, and that's changed my life. And he would say anything other than your primary residence, you should pay cash for. And I don't think that works unless you have a very large income if you do want to invest in real estate. Laura, do you want to add or subtract anything from your expert experience?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been following Dave for a long time, teaching his financial piece, and I'm glad that it changed your life, because I found that it does change people's lives. It's a class everybody should take. It just gives you the basics. And as real estate agents, I think a lot of times, we're getting people into different situations that may or may not be the best for them, but helping them, find their way financially, or anybody really find their way financially, really starts with a couple different things. And one of the things he really focuses on, and I just want to mention, is everydollar.com.
Yes.
Is a website so that you can create a monthly budget. You can have a free version of it that you can use, but that is the number one thing. I think once people figure out where their money's going, and I know somebody mentioned, I like to find ways to not feel like, you're always behind. Well, that all starts with your budget. So if you can create your budget, then you're not going to overspend, because if you spend more than you make, you got problems. You're living on credit cards, things like that. So number one, find out where your money's going, track it. Number two, take your money off autopilot, all those things that you put on your credit cards, Netflix and Amazon and all these different things that people spend money on. And so part of what Dave takes you on the journey is to learn the basics, but also just taking your money off autopilot. That's what I tell people. It's just, you say, oh, I'll get to that. And I'm pretty sure most people spend more time watching, their favorite series on TV than they do planning where their money's going.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think that this book, which I have a couple gift cards. So if you want to give them away, I have this on audio, this book, and be happy to give it away to a couple people that
that'd be awesome.
are interested.
Awesome. If you're interested, drop your email address in the chat, and I'll do a drawing probably after this. That's very kind and generous of you, Lori. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like I said,
I've had the Every Dollar app for, I don't know, years now, and you're totally right. I think too many of us want to automate our money, and I'm going to talk a little bit about automation later. There's a lot of good versions of automation, but automating your decisions around where your money is going, I think that's one thing that Dave gets really right is, no, you have to have a relationship with your money. You need to be looking at it, and too many people like, I don't know what I pay for that. Like, I don't know is not an option. My wife and I have been on a shared budget for, I don't know, a decade now. And it is a difference maker.
To truly make progress, you have to know where your money's going. And and when you get into trying to build wealth, you need to find $100 or $200 more in your budget, because after you're done paying off your debt, that's the money that you're investing. So that's what's going to get you ahead, and that's what's going to get you to a point where you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yes, and I think my final note on Dave, and it's back to that victim mentality comment that I made earlier, is because he is so ardently against debt, when he takes his calls and talks with people, he pushes against the notion like, well, I guess I just got to take on a student loan. And he may not always have the most realistic ideas, but he's going to push you to think, wait, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? Can you do that? There's more creative ways to living life than many average Americans do. Well, I guess I'm an average American, so I guess I better do that. I guess we better go to Disney and put 10 grand on a credit card. And I just appreciate most of us change and make good decisions when there's healthy pressure against us. And I think that that's something that Dave does really well. So that's Dave. We're going to move on to another very different voice who has shaped things for me. His name is Robert Kiyosaki. Robert wrote a very famous book that I know at least some of you have read called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is is it a parable? Yeah, he basically tells a story of, hey, I've got two dads. One's my biological father, and my biological father is kind of status quo in his thinking. Hey, yeah, you should go to college. You should get good grades. You should go to college. Might require taking on debt. You should go get a W-2 job, and very status quo. And then his rich dad, which is the friend of father's father of one of his friends. Again, I don't believe this is truly his upbringing. Kind of introduced him to a new way of thinking about life as an entrepreneur, thinking about life as an investor owner, not just someone who's going along with the rat race, which is a term that we've all heard. So a couple of kind of key principles from Robert Kiyosaki, and none of this is rocket science, but it's so good. Number one is it's more about what you keep than what you make. I think if I were to ask any of you, hey, how are things going for you with money right now? Most of you are going to say, oh, well, I'm having a good year with sales, which that's an income related question. And I'll tell you, I talk with a lot of agents. I'm aware of kind of the financials of a lot of agents' businesses. There are a lot of very successful agents who make a lot of money whose businesses are not profitable. And so Robert's going to say, no, whether you're making $40,000 a year or $240,000 a year, it's about what you keep more than what you make. And so expense management is always going to be central. He has another kind of key point, and I wrote that word twice, but rich people, not just rich people, rich people acquire assets. Poor people acquire liabilities that they think are assets. Does anybody want to unmute and take a stab at what you think he means there?
I can do that.
All right, Keisha, take a swing.
Okay, this is putting it in today's terms, and I'm sorry, I'm just coming from my car. So rich people acquire assets, so things that will appreciate over the long term, like real estate or investments or some type of asset that will appreciate for a very long time, has long standing, whereas poor people invest in things that are short term, like maybe fancy cars or shoes or designer clothes, you know, which looks good in the moment, but it's not going to give you the most longevity. I hope I explained that. I don't know.
Yeah, that was good. The one nuance there, and this is where I think he's a little bit extreme, and we as real estate professionals might think he's a bit extreme. He's going to define an asset as something that produces income, not just something that goes up in value. So an accountant's version of an asset is something that has value. This is an asset. Granted, it might only be worth 20 cents, but it's an asset. So in traditional thinking, hey, count up all your assets, your IRAs, your 401ks, your cars, your jewelry, your stuff, your furniture. Those are technically assets. And Kiyosaki is going to say, no, most of those things are liabilities masquerading as assets. Sure, they may have some value. If you were going to go sell it on Facebook Marketplace, you might sell it for $1. But those are not what's making you rich. And conversely, poor people make the mistake of buying stuff, thinking that it has value. Cars are a great example. Does a car go up in value over time? Not unless it's like a rare collector's item. You know, I'm not a car guy, but there's probably like a '69 Corvette or something. You know, those that might go up in value. But no, the moment you drive the car off a lot, it's going to go down in value. And every 10,000 miles more you put on it, it's going to go down in value. I drive a 2017 Hyundai Tucson that just went over 100,000 miles. You better believe it's worth less than it was last year. They go down in value. Boats go down in value. Our stuff goes down in value. Kiyosaki is going to go so far as to say that your primary residence is not an asset. I disagree with him because my primary residence is worth more today than it was yesterday, and even if it's not kicking off income, I'm okay with that. So he, like I said, he's a little bit extreme. He's very kind of anti-taxation and kind of a libertarian extremist. So I'm not going to support his necessarily his political ideology. But the asset thinking, and this is one of the things that I became very intent on is, hey, each year, Claire, as she and I are doing strategies, like what assets are we going to buy? And for us, thank you. Thanks. We are real estate investors, like I mentioned. So that's an obvious one. Hey, what asset are we going to buy for us to grow our world? And then the other one, sorry, that's blurry. I apologize. But one of the concepts that he introduces in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then develops in one of his later books, which is literally called the cash flow quadrant, is this. And this is one that operates as a guiding principle for me. And for those of you who know Jose Medina, for him as well. Jose actually has this image pinned up on his wall and has the word focus written above the top with an arrow going towards the right side of the quadrant. So I'm just going to explain this briefly because this is a really helpful framework for those that aren't familiar. So starting top left, these are basically the 4 areas where money is made. You can make your money as an employee. Hey, I work for someone else. I invest my time and I get money. The risk there is I'm at the beck and call of someone else. I might not have that job next week. My income is probably going to be limited. And so pros and cons there. You move down, and this is where we are as real estate professionals. We're self-employed. I, again, am trading my time for money, but it's my time. And the floor is lower and the ceiling is higher. But it's still my time for money. And many doctors are this way. Many lawyers are this way. If I'm not doing the thing, if I'm not landing the client, then I'm not getting paid. And so risks and opportunities there. Then as you move to the top right of the quadrant into the B side of the quadrant, you it just says employees for money. But really your tools, your systems, your technology, people. I have a world where if I wasn't doing it, I could step away and money is being created. And ultimately that's the opportunity of real estate, though the overwhelming majority of people don't get there. They live in the S world, and that's okay. But don't call yourself a business owner if you're not really running much of a business. And then at the bottom right of the quadrant is the investor quadrant, where your money works for more money. And that's a fairly obvious one. And so over time, the more you move from the left to the right side of the quadrant, the more stable your world becomes, and the bigger your opportunity becomes.
Can I
actually,
mention something
Yeah,
on that
please.
that you brought up? So the biggest thing I think about what he talks about in this book, that it kind of talked a little bit about, and people are familiar, but his story of when he grew up, he had basically what he saw as two dads, one his friend's dad and his own dad. And if you look at that, when you're talking about the quadrants, so he grew up with a dad that worked a normal 9-to-5 job, but then his friend's dad, if I'm remembering it right, was a business owner.
Yep.
And so and I think this is so important. I mean, I've been doing real estate now for almost 25 years, and the people who make it in this business are the ones that understand they have to move from that mindset of being an employee and not being afraid and willing to take the risks necessary to be a business owner.
Yes.
And I don't think you have to have employees to be successful.
Agreed.
I think it's great if you want to go there, but you can be a single agent and be very successful. But the mindset in this book, I think, in his first book, is probably the most important thing to kind of look at and think about. How am I thinking about myself and my business? And then as my business funds my life, which then, gets me to the wealth that I want to bring down the line. So that the difference between when you talk about Dave and you talk about now Robert Kiyosaki, is Dave is much more technical, where this might be a little more thinking about your mindset and how you approach your business. And
Totally agree. And I really appreciate you kind of doubling down on that, Lori, because I think many of us, so the least scalable thing in your world is your personality. And many of us run personality-based businesses. Hey, I'm nice and people like me, which is a wonderful thing to be, and it doesn't scale. And so the moving from S to B, and I'm with you, you don't have to have a bunch of employees in order to think like a business owner and to operate like a business owner, is to ask, what in my world am I doing that I could make more duplicable than it is, more systematic than it is? What went well here that I can ensure will go well next time? And even if I got sick and I had someone else step in, they could step in and do that because I've got it documented, because it's repeatable. So you don't need to think, oh gosh, I'm not in a position to hire employees, so I guess I'll never be a business owner. If it's not repeatable, then it's not a business. Gina just popped in, and we're getting ready to partner with a company to help our coaching agents that are in the coaching program. And this guy, he's been pitching this program to Keller Williams Realty International, and met with Jason Abrams recently. And Jason asked him that exact same question. Hey, Jake, if you were to step away from this, what, does this work without your personality? And if the answer is no, then you got to not go back to the drawing board, but you need to reconsider the value of your business, which that's an entirely different conversation, but a really worthwhile one. So I appreciate it. All right, voice number 3, J.L. Collins is probably the person many of you have heard from the least. He wrote this fantastic book called The Simple Path to Wealth, subtitled Your Roadmap to Financial Independence and a Rich, Free Life. He is kind of a paragon of the financial independence community, for those of you that kind of step into that space at all. And his story, it is a simple one. It's someone who said, I'm working a high stress, high pressure job that I don't love, that if someone wanted to fire me today, they could. And I don't like that high stress and brittle existence. Now, for us as real estate professionals, it's not the same. But he basically said, I need to get to a place where I've got money earning money for me that enables me to step away and do what I want to do. His main argument is in favor of the United States stock market. And that's a really broad brushstrokes, but the book is effectively a thesis. And he wrote a 60 article blog that eventually became this book, basically talking about the reliability of becoming a broad-based index fund investor, which is effectively what Dave kind of talks about in some ways as well. Dave has some more kind of specific things that he recommends. J.L. Collins will say, first of all, you build wealth by spending less than you earn. And then with the difference, you invest that. And then the book basically becomes a thesis for why you can bet on the United States stock market over time. Now, he's opposed to stock picking. And part of what he argues for is, hey, most traders, most professionals don't outperform the broad-based S&P 500. And so rather than pretending to be a professional or spending money on a professional who may or may not be beating the market, buy the market. And so he talks a lot about a mutual fund called VTSAX. That's Vanguard's Total Stock Market Index Fund. That's incredibly inexpensive. It's a 0.04% expense ratio, which I could nerd out on later if you guys care to talk about what that means. And he basically says, you build wealth by investing a consistent amount of money as consistently as possible when the market goes up, when the market goes down, because it's going to continue to do that, but over time, it always grows. As you look back over the last 100 years in the U.S. economy, it has basically done this, and it's done it with this along the way. But you're not investing in the stock market as a quick hit, maybe I could get that meme stock or whatever and make some money quick. This isn't Robin Hood. This is buying the U.S. economy and riding with it over time. He talks about the value of FU money. Jose will call that forget you money. But basically, FU money is money that it's more than an emergency fund. So an emergency fund is, hey, if something happens, I've got money to take care of it in the meantime. FU money is if I'm in a situation that I don't like, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship that I have financial dependency to or whatever, FU money enables me to step away without fretting about money. And for each of us, that's going to be a different amount of money, but it's more kind of a step along the way to financial independence where, say, okay, I've got $100,000 and that's not going to last me for forever, but it'll enable me to take a break, catch my breath, and consider what's next without having to fret. And so that thinking, and this goes back to the whole agency conversation, is I'm in charge of my destiny at the end of the day, and me saving up money is only going to give me more options. The main point where I stray from Collins is he's very just buy the stock market and chill. As I've mentioned a dozen times already, I'm a real estate investor. And I believe that there's higher opportunity and there's more reasons to invest in real estate. But the simplicity is essential. And I think he gets that right. I effectively invest in two things: that index fund and real estate. And that's how I've built my world. All right, final voice that I'll talk about today, and this is the one he brings the bodacious language. Ramit Sethi is how you pronounce that last name. He is of Indian American heritage, and he has got a fantastic podcast. He's written this book. The podcast has the same name, I believe. Episodes hit every Tuesday morning, and he's kind of a brash, highly educated, tell you like he thinks it sort of person, but he's a Stanford trained psychologist. And so kind of like Dave, though it couldn't feel more different, he gets that the biggest problem in your money world has more to do with your head, your heart, and your ego than it does to do with spreadsheets and expense ratios. And so he really gets that well. And his podcast is fantastic. I find myself recommending it all the time. Give it a listen. It's deep. He goes an hour interviewing couples, and it's kind of money psychology, but it's really good. Okay, a couple things that I really appreciate about Ramit is number one, he'll say he's not a big budget person, and I don't, frankly, I'm not fully with him there, but he'll say, spend lavishly on the things you love and cut ruthlessly the things that you don't. He pushes back against this modern American notion that, oh, I don't know, well, we just got this subscription and we joined the club because that's what we do. And that, I guess I've got that gym membership that, you know, who knows how often I go. And many Americans, we just we let our lifestyles creep and bloat without really thinking about it. And he talks a lot about your rich life, having a vision for what you really want. And, you know, I'm looking at Sandy because you're on my screen here. Sandy's version of a rich life might be very different from mine. Your version of a rich life might be going on 2 trips a year with your grandchildren and being able to provide experiences for them. Mine might be getting a fancy boat, you know, and Ramit is refreshingly unjudgmental in what your version of a rich life might be, because no, it's your life, and your job is not to try to copy and paste what someone else is doing. You can get ideas from other people, but my life and your life are different, and my goals and your goals are different, and that's okay. And so his mindset around spend lavishly. Like, if you love good food, get good food, go to the nice restaurants, realizing that might mean that you need to cut ruthlessly something that you don't care about. How many of us have streaming services that we haven't logged into in weeks? And it might only be 12 or 14 bucks a month. And you might say, what's the harm? But if that's your whole mindset on things, that creeps into things. For me, I mentioned my 2017 Hyundai. I am not a car guy. And when I see someone driving around with a big flashy car, I'm often being like, well, you know, you could have spent that money in places that would have been more meaningful to me. But that's their version of a rich life. And so it's all about, I think he gets the trade-offs game really, really well. And I think the question for each of you is, where am I unthinkingly, and it goes both ways, unthinkingly spending too much on stuff that I don't really care about, that doesn't really contribute to my vision for my life. And we all have things like that. So, you know, I don't know is not a valid answer. And then the flip side of that is, where am I skimping, or where am I thinking too small in relation to things that I really do love? You know, when he does talk about food, and I love good food. My team here laughs about the weird foods that I like. And like, you know, if your idea of a good time on a Friday night is going out to TGI Fridays, no judgment from me. But that's not how I'd prefer to do it. If I'm going to go out, I'm going to look to spend a lot more than you would at Fridays, but I'm going to do it less often because I can't afford to do it all that often. So thinking through, where do I need to have more fun, and where do I need to be more conscious about where I'm spending? Another thing that I appreciate about Ramit is his negotiator's mindset. And he makes fun of his Indian heritage about just like, oh, we love giving the banks a hard time. We love negotiating for fees. We love playing that game. For me, I'm not that way. But he says, hey, you know, if you're at a salaried environment, you're probably more valuable than what you're getting paid, perhaps. If you're self-employed, are you cutting yourself short? Are you getting, you know, underpaid for the value you provide? And that's very timely relative to our buyer agency NAR stuff that we're talking about right now. But he's always going to encourage you to think through, what am I worth, and am I getting paid what I'm worth? And or am I overspending, and can I negotiate against that? One of the things that Ramit talks about, so he pushes against a budget, and he encourages something called the conscious spending plan, which is basically get simple with it, get clear with it, write it down and follow it. But don't he pushes against people that feel like they need to have a budget 60 items deep that just becomes more confusing and unclarifying than anything. So like, get clear, get simple, and go. But he has buckets, and one of those buckets is basically 3 main buckets. One is fixed expenses. This is the stuff. I've got rent or my mortgage. I've got insurance. I've got utilities. You know, debt payments, perhaps. Hey, I've got my car note, whatever. Fixed costs, investing. And he says 15% of your income. I'm going to say more than that, because if you want to build wealth, why not? And then he has a bucket called guilt-free spending. And says, hey, you should have a good sized bucket for guilt-free spending, which means if you are married or have a partner, you don't need to like be all up in each other's business. Wait, how much are you spending over there? It's like, no, we each have a bucket for guilt-free spending, which means life is meant to be lived and enjoyed, and don't be so scarce and fearful that you can't enjoy it along the way, which I appreciate it. One beef of mine with Ramit is that he is overly suspicious of the value of home ownership. He's kind of a big city guy, and he pushes against the notion, kind of like Kiyosaki, that your house is just an asset. He's like, no, your house has lots of expenses. You know, how many of you have bought a home that requires you to fix something within the first little bit? So he's in favor of renting and investing more aggressively. Again, I'm not going to land in that place. I love real estate, and you do too, because you're here. But I've appreciated Ramit's voice. I find it to be rather refreshing. So this is me boiling down the path. And this is what I've done, and this is what you can do. And you might find this overly simplistic, but this is my path to building wealth. Number one, your income has to be greater than your expenses. It's simple. You're not going to build wealth if you're spending more money than you're making. Having a target number each month will help. So I only want my expenses to be this percentage of my income, or I want to make sure that I've got this much to be able to invest every month. Having something that you aim for on a monthly basis, that's something that I've done personally, which I can talk about more later if you care. But that's essential. Number two, measure your net worth. That's an uncomfortable thing. If you've never done it before, gosh, maybe I'm negative. Maybe I don't own a home, or maybe my home isn't worth that much more than I owe against it. Maybe I have a lot of debt and not much saved up. No shame. And I say it's better to have clarity than to just have your head in the sand and not facing reality. But measure your net worth. Number three, get an emergency fund. Dave's going to say 3 to 6 months. I think that's pretty good. I've generally been on the lean edge of that, just because I'm obsessed with having my money work hard for me. But 3 to 6 months of your expenses, not three to 6 months of income. Income's an arbitrary thing, but of your expenses. Hey, if you spend $5,000 a month on your life, then you should have $15,000 to $30,000 in an emergency fund. I put in the parentheses there a money market account, only because money market account, they're going to earn you 4.5% or 5% now. Better to earn a little bit of money than no money. But your emergency fund is all about liquidity, meaning if I need it next week, I can access it next week. I don't need to wait for the sale of something in order for it to work. Number four, so we're measuring your net worth in number two, which is just getting into reality about where you're at. And then number four, track your net worth. This means, hey, I'm pulling it up and I'm getting updates. And I say minimum of quarterly. I actually do it monthly, just because I like to gamify this and I like to see progress, because it makes it fun and it's motivating for me. But tracking it and see what's going on. Then you can see, oh, well, the markets hasn't been great this year, or my properties. For me, with my rental properties, I evaluate those on a quarterly basis, because that feels like it's enough. Some might say annually. That's your choice there. And number five, once you're at the investing point, so you're only investing once you've kind of got the house in order, just like Dave says, you're investing in high liquidity options first. High liquidity means I can access it easily. I'm not vulnerable to the market taking a dip today and being in trouble. I'm not needing to sell a property in order to have access to it. These are money market accounts, savings accounts. If you wanted to do like a brokerage account with some of it in an index fund, you could, but liquidity is important first. Then after that, we invest in high yield opportunities after that. For me, I'm very simple. 90% of my world is either in real estate or in VTSAX, the Vanguard mutual fund that I mentioned earlier. I've got a little bit of cryptocurrency. I've got a few other little things, more for like fun than for conviction. because I try to keep things as simple as possible. But those are high yield, and over time, those gain value. And in my tracker, I like to see how much they've grown since I've purchased them, which is fun. And then keep focused by continuing to learn. Like when I read these books, it's not about, oh my gosh, I'm reading something that I've never thought about before. Sometimes it is, but usually it's just about getting a fresh angle, re-engaging with it, and gaining mastery. I think we can't become masters of things that we're not learning about, and we can't become confident in things that we're not learning about. And we win by gaining confidence over time and taking the right steps. What questions do you have? Ask me anything. What have I touched on that sparked curiosity? What have I said that offended you and you want to clarify? What are you curious about?
Mark, was this recorded where I could go back and watch the first 30 minutes I lost?
Oh, probably.
Okay. Very good information. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Tracy. I feel like you could have taught this class yourself.
This is Lori again.
Mark. Yeah, go
ahead. Okay, so a couple things. It's interesting because when you compare the different books that you just went over, they all kind of still have the same general basic thing. And that is know what you spend, know where you're spending it, and have a plan for your money. Those are kind of like the three golden things. And then I liked all of your list of different things that you put out there. And the one thing that if people are like, well, where do I start? Action items, like you said, again, know where you're spending money and know your baseline. Like if I got up today, like how much does it cost for me just to live in my house, pay my electric bill, and do nothing past that? That's like an important number to know. I know exactly what that number is for myself. And then the other thing is carry around a little 3x5 card. When I was paying off my debt, years ago, I carried around a little 3x5 card and I kept it in my purse, my wallet. I looked at it like every day. This is how much money I have to spend. This is how much I have to pay off, and smallest to largest, and just like have some kind of visual aid. Because I think we're so digital these days, we kind of forget how to do things on just pen and paper, visual things. So, maybe think of ways to, do that for yourself. But yeah, good information. I got 2 more books to read, so that's good. And the other thing I want to mention is, I got 5 names. I've got 3 audio books and 2 regular books. So those 5 people that put their emails in, if you guys want to put on there that you'd like a hard copy book, I got 2 hard copy books, probably more, but and then I don't know where everybody's office is, but I'm in Medina. So if you're close, you can pick it up at Medina or Strongsville.
That's super kind. Really appreciate that, Lori.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does boil down to a lot of the same stuff. And you're right, actually understanding your monthly spend is essential to all of this. In the financial independence community, you're not like even in the game if you don't know that number, because the definition of financial independence, I talk with a lot of people, oh, I'd love to be financially independent. What they mean by that is like, I'd love to not be stressed about where my next check is going to come from, which is not it. Financial independence means my assets create more income than my monthly expenses. And so if I spend $5,000 a month, that means my assets need to create more than $5,000 a month in income in order to have hit that crossover point. So if you don't know your monthly expenses, you're not even in the game.
Right. And I did put in the chat a link to a net worth calculator, because I do believe that you should do that minimum once every January. I like quarterly is great, but at least once a year, you got to sign where you're starting for the beginning of the year. And so you could be excited about your progress as well. So take a look at that. That's like a little online one that Dave has on his website.
It's motivating for me, like to be able to see progress. And for me, like my one of my like just little silly goals is that I want my net worth to grow more each year, but by more than what I made. I want my world growing income to be more than my earned income. And not that that's like an important thing, but it's fun to see like, no, my dollars are working harder than I am, which is a fun way for me to think about it. Any other questions or thoughts before we put a bow? Yeah, Dana.
I have a question. How do you get your spouse on board with these processes? If they're
That's $1 million question.
Yeah, if you could figure that one out, let me know.
I will say, so right now, Ramit's book is helpful on a personal level. The next book he's working on is Couples and Money. So I'm excited for that one. And his podcast is strictly Couples and Money. So I think I would say, is my spouse disinterested or are they opposed? Because those are different things. Disinterested might mean I feel insecure. She does a nice job with it. Like, whatever, I'm living my life and I don't really like having money conversations. Opposed is stop being so uptight. We need to live our lives. And so I think for you to evaluate, like, is the challenge more in action or in posture?
it's both.
Both.
Yeah, like my husband and I met 11 years ago and his credit was terrible. So I like fixed everything and I handle everything. And his stance on it is, well, I can spend money now because we make enough money now. And no one's coming to repo my car and no one's taking our house away and all our bills are paid and you're handling it all. And so I can go buy and do whatever I want. And I'm like, well, yeah, but we're not saving anything. So
I think in the yesterday's episode or Tuesday's episode from Ramit was exactly this. So like you should go there and listen to it just because I feel like it could be a script for that conversation. You got to go to the why. And I think Ramit challenges people for thinking too small. Like, oh, yeah, you buy stuff at Target or you like buy yourself a little $2,500 fishing boat. Like, that's fine. Is that your rich life? And I think when you think through, if we were to do this instead of some of that, meaning investing, let's look what it could become over time. What would that enable us to do? And I think like tying into the bigger motivation of like, do you want to be free? Do you want to be able to travel? Do you want to be able to give to others? I think you can't nag them into it. You can't force them into it. They have to want something more than what they've settled for, which is a big task.
Well, yeah, it's hard to get people to think about the future because from where his perspective is, we've done so much already because you've gotten so far. And so now he feels like he's in a safe space, but then, you know, what happens if something happens to you? And if you have kids, what happens then?
right.
You know, so we need to have a plan together, whether you're both on board with every dollar going out the door may not ever be resolved, but if you at least have that initial plan and like, you know, Mark was saying, you know, what do we want kind of thing.
Yeah.
But to get them to maybe budget, because if you read Dave's book and you listen to, one person is usually the spender and one person is the saver. And you're probably the saver and he's probably the spender.
we're both spenders, but in different things. Like he's constantly like buying lottery tickets. Like this is our retirement fund. And I'm like, that's not gonna do it, dude. Like these are just pieces of paper that we're throwing away. Like it makes me crazy.
That would take his money away. He wouldn't be allowed to be buying lotto tickets. It's
Yeah.
either a want or a need, honey. We don't need those.
It's like, it's crazy. So yeah, he's a big kid.
Oof.
Well,
There's a lot
tell
of
him, here's your $200. Do with it as you please.
Yeah, and I think that's like back to the guilt-free spending, because if he feels like, oh, she's only restrictive, it's not, you just admitted to being a bit of a spender too. I think if you guys define, and this goes back to the budget or the conscious spending plan, if you define what's okay, he might say, get out of my space. Like, well, you're allowed to have some space, but it's our world that we're building together, and some space is okay, but recklessness is not okay. If you want to spend $200 a month on lotto tickets, I don't support that, but like, you do you, bro. But you can't spend $2,000 a month in lotto tickets because that's our future.
Yeah, if you showed him, there's a great chart out there too. $200 invested between now and, let's say 20, 30 years is like $1 million.
Yeah.
So just ask him if he wants $1 million for sure, or maybe $1 million, one of those lottery tickets.
Well, and I think you're not going to get him to read The Simple Path to Wealth, but I think that's one of the points that he makes in here is like a lot of people view the market like gambling. Like, well, I don't know. I could play poker. I could buy lotto tickets, or I could invest in stocks. And it's like, no. Those are not the same thing. And he basically says like, no, it's not gambling when you understand what's happening with index funds. Now, if you're buying a meme stock, that's effectively gambling. If you're speculating, that's gambling. But if you actually believe in what the stock market's doing, which he helps you to do, then like Lori said, it is a sure thing. It's not like well, I don't know. There's no guarantee. It's like, yeah, there's no guarantees in life. But for the last 100 years, that's what the market's been doing.
Yeah.
Good
Thank you.
conversation, folks. We're short on time. I dropped my email and phone number on there if there's stuff that you're curious about or wanted to go deeper on. I clearly love this stuff. Lori, I appreciate you jumping in because you've got a lot of wisdom and experience as well. And money's
Mark,
good.
I think you should start a class or something, like a monthly meeting on this stuff.
You know,
To
we
learn
did it.
more about.
Well,
We
if you
did
want
it in
financial
2023.
peace, we can always do financial peace.
I'm
Mhm.
good on the real estate part, but I'd like to learn on the other stock part you were talking about. I came in when you were already chatting about that, so I missed it.
Yeah.
I got
Yeah,
a lot of real estate investments, but I want to kind of turn a little and do something a little different.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
Tracy, we did like a wealth builders club a month ago, or a year ago in 2023, where it was every month we gather and we kind of would hit a different topic. So maybe we need to bring that back around.
yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd like that.
Ryan asked me stock ticker VTSAX. That's Vanguard Total Stock Index Fund. It is VTSAX is the mutual fund, and the nice thing about mutual funds is that you can buy a share of them. I can buy $100 a month of a mutual fund, even if it's worth more than that. VTI is the one that's an ETF version of that same thing. It's the exact same stuff, but it functions like a stock as opposed to a fund. So you do it a little bit differently. If you want to nerd out, I'm glad to nerd out with you, Ryan.
I got one book left. I got Jennifer took one hard copy, and I've got one more if somebody wants to throw their name in there, which I'll get, and you'll have to let me know, Mark, where the rest of the people are.
Yeah, I think we had Preston, Laura, or Lauren, Jennifer, and Ryan and Sandy all threw their email addresses in there.
Yeah, I got Jennifer. I just don't have the other folks.
Okay.
And I don't know where they're out of. So you can just email me or whatever.
Sure will.
All right.
All right, y'all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And go and prosper.
Thanks, Mark.